Errol was the punching bag of his village. Every damn day, someone reminded him he was useless, weak, and just a background extra in a world where magic decided everything. Yet somehow, this so-called nobody would outshine even the chosen ones. The story kicked off in a peaceful little village where a boy named Errol sat having lunch with his overly dramatic family. His dad couldn't stop shaking his head at how calm the kid looked, saying he barely slept a wink thinking about what kind of hero class his son might get. Meanwhile, his mom was hyped like it was Christmas morning, already imagining her son becoming some legendary warrior. His big sister, on the other hand, bragged that Errol would easily outshine every kid in school, while his mom added that he'd probably have every girl chasing after him. That last part didn't sit right with the sister, who started worrying that her precious little brother might get stolen away by some random fangirl army. But Errol, the dude was the only sane one at that table. He already accepted that he was probably going to be average, just another background character in someone else's adventure. In this world, every child received a hero class on their 10th birthday, basically a divine gift from some higher being that decided your entire career path. These blessings could turn a regular kid into anything from a mighty warrior to a humble blacksmith. And that day, the school was packed with nervous students waiting to get classified like they were loot boxes in an RPG. The priest began the ceremony by touching the forehead of the first kid, who immediately saw fiery hammers in his mind. The kid ran back to his dad, screaming like he just pulled a 5-star weapon, and soon, the priest started blessing everyone else in line. Then came the main event, Errol's turn. His sister whispered that he was definitely getting something amazing, and the whole family started cheering like they were at a championship game. The entire crowd began whispering too, expecting the son of Sword Princess Farah and Archmage Leon to get some next-level class. I mean, with parents that stacked, it was basically nepotism waiting to happen. But life had other plans. Errol closed his eyes, waited for the divine image to appear, and saw absolutely nothing. Just pure darkness. The priest blinked in confusion, tried again, then finally admitted that the boy had no class at all. Literally. No skill, no magic, no nothing. Just a rare case of classless hero. The entire crowd went silent. His family, who were seconds away from throwing a party, instantly looked like they'd just been told their son was a tax auditor. His mom and dad deflated, convinced they'd been scammed by the gods themselves, while his sister sat there trying to process that her future prodigy brother was now a certified failure. The next morning, Errol picked up a wooden sword and went out to train like nothing happened. His parents assured him they wouldn't kick him out. Yeah, what loving support. He told them he'd be fine, that he didn't want to freeload, and his sister promised to cheer him on forever like a supportive fangirl. Errol reminded everyone that he had been training swordsmanship with his mom for years, so even if he had no fancy title, he wasn't useless. But deep down, he couldn't help thinking that his mother's idea of training was borderline child abuse. Every time they sparred, she sent him flying like a ragdoll with her god-tier strength. Still, his mom was proud that he was so wise, and his dad started daydreaming about him getting a real job one day, like a proud parent watching their kid finally take out the trash. Seeing everyone fussing over him, Errol got tired of the pity party and decided to go train alone. When he reached the training grounds, he spotted 2 boys dueling. Both were proud holders of the swordsman class, showing off their shiny new skills. When they noticed Errol, they gave him the classic, "What's a loser like you doing here, last look?" He told them he was just there to train, but they laughed it off, saying they didn't even need to train anymore since their class did all the heavy lifting. Then, with smug grins, they offered to show him how real swordsmen fight, and that's when Errol realized this was going to be a long, stupid day. As Errol stood on the sidelines watching those 2 wannabe swordsmen swing at each other, he couldn't help but notice how clean and flashy their moves looked. Their blades cut through the air with the kind of grace that only came from their shiny swordsman class. It was like watching 2 peacocks showing off feathers they didn't earn. Errol, who had no class whatsoever, decided he'd had enough of watching them flex. So he stepped forward and asked them for a duel. That single sentence was enough to make one of the boys choke on his own ego. He burst out laughing, calling Errol crazy for challenging someone who actually had a class. Errol, with the calmness of a monk and the confidence of a man who's had enough BS for one day, simply thought to himself that he didn't need some divine title to swing a sword. The insult stung though, and the boy's pride couldn't take it. So he accepted the challenge, planning to teach the classless nobody a good lesson. Before starting, the swordsman reminded Errol to check his protection blessing, that invisible life shield everyone was born with, which recharged when they weren't taking damage. Errol gave a casual nod, basically saying, "Don't worry bro, I won't die that easily," and told him to get ready for the duel. Fueled by rage and pure teenage ego, the boy charged in, screaming like a war hero, only for Errol to effortlessly parry his first swing like he was swatting a fly. The kid blinked in disbelief. He tried another strike, but Errol dodged again, locking blades in a clean counter. The second boy watching thought his friend was just playing around and yelled at him to finish it already. But the red-faced swordsman snapped back that Errol wasn't just some punching bag. The 2 clashed again, steel meeting steel, sparks flying. After a few more exchanges, the boy realized something terrible. He couldn't win. His class wasn't saving him, and his pride was about to take a fatal hit. So he decided to cheat like a true coward and called for backup. The second boy jumped in from behind, trying to catch Errol off guard. But Errol had senses sharper than their brains combined. He felt the attack coming, sidestepped smoothly, and watched as the two idiots bumped into each other mid-swing. Standing there, watching them argue mid-battle about whose fault it was, Errol finally understood the truth. No class in the world could fix stupidity. While they were busy yelling, he dashed in like a shadow. One moment he was gone, the next he was under one of them, landing a clean uppercut straight to the jaw. The poor kid hit the dirt, eyes spinning. The other panicked and tried to rush in for revenge, but tripped over his own fallen friend. Errol didn't waste the opportunity. Another quick strike, another idiot down. Both boys lay flat on the ground, groaning in disbelief. Errol brushed the dust off himself and casually announced that he'd won. But the losers, bruised and humiliated, started whining that he caught them off guard. Errol, being the unbothered king he was, agreed to a rematch without hesitation. But before they could embarrass themselves further, a sharp voice cut through the field. A red-haired boy with a confident posture and the kind of aura that screamed main character rival told them to stop acting like fools. He said if they lost, they should take the L like real swordsmen instead of making excuses. The two boys froze instantly. One of them tried to talk back but was quickly shut up by his friend, who whispered that the redhead was Captain Evan's son. That name alone was enough to make them tremble. Evan was the village's head of security and one of the strongest swordsmen around. The redhead stepped up to Errol, studying him like a judge inspecting a criminal. He asked if Errol was the son of Sword Princess Farah. When Errol confirmed, the redhead nodded, admitting that Errol's technique was solid, clearly a result of his mother's training. But he wasn't about to let Errol's win over those two weaklings impress him. He pointed his blade at Errol and declared that he wanted a real fight. The air got heavy. He announced that he'd show Errol the true power of a swordsman class, his tone dripping with pride. The two defeated boys whispered to each other, realizing this really was Evan's kid, the same Evan who used to team up with Errol's mom for monster hunts. Errol looked at the boy's cute, delicate face and wondered how this baby-faced redhead could be that grumpy old man's son. Maybe puberty just hit different for their family. The boy's shoulders trembled, clearly fueled by daddy issues and jealousy. He spoke passionately about his father, a brave, wise swordsman who'd once been the pride of the village, and complained that Errol's mother had stolen the title of strongest swordsman. At that, Errol immediately understood what was going on. The guy wasn't here for honor, he was just salty that his mom was better than his dad. Errol pointed that out bluntly and the redhead froze, face turning red for reasons beyond his hair color. Embarrassed but trying to save face, he demanded to know if Errol also thought his mother was stronger than his father. Errol didn't even hesitate to confirm it. His mother was the strongest person in the village, and honestly, everyone already knew that. But the redhead wasn't about to let that slide. With pride puffing out of his chest like a rooster before a fight, he bragged that he inherited his father's unmatched swordsmanship. He swore he'd defeat Errol just to prove his family's superiority. After cooling off a bit, the redhead explained that he'd officially become a swordsman a year ago and had been training under his father ever since. With his experience and natural talent, he was absolutely sure he couldn't lose. Errol, meanwhile, just nodded with that calm, yeah, sure, whatever, energy and reminded him that he'd been trained by the Sword Princess herself. So no, he wasn't planning to lose either. The tension grew as both raised their swords. The redhead struck first, slashing down with confidence. Errol instantly parried and retaliated. Sparks flew. The clash of metal echoed through the field as the two went head-to-head like seasoned rivals. The audience, those two idiot swordsmen from earlier, stood frozen, jaws wide open. They couldn't believe their eyes. How the hell was a classless guy keeping up with someone born with divine buffs? As the redhead's attacks grew faster, Errol noticed something. The kid was strong, no doubt, but his moves were wild, driven more by anger than control. Errol stayed calm, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. But before he could land a clean hit, the redhead suddenly shouted and unleashed a special skill, the Twin Slice. Two lightning-fast slashes cut through the air, and before Errol could blink, the second strike sent him flying into a wall. For a second, the redhead looked stunned. His first attack had been blocked, impressive for a classless nobody, but the second hit had drawn blood. Errol gritted his teeth, trying to stay on his feet. He asked what that move was, and the redhead smugly explained that it was a swordsman class skill, something a classless person could never block. Errol, stubborn as ever, just wiped the blood off and said he'd figure out how to block it with practice. The redhead paused for a moment, then gave a rare smile, impressed by Errol's sheer guts. A few days later, the morning peace in the house shattered when Errol's sister walked into his room and found him snoring like a corpse. She tried to wake him up with a morning kiss, and instantly got rejected by a headbutt as Errol jolted awake. The poor girl staggered back, furious, demanding an apology kiss like some spoiled princess. Errol ignored her and dragged himself to breakfast, where his mom, Farah, smiled like nothing happened. As the family ate together, his sister asked if he was heading out to train again. When Errol nodded, she got annoyed and told him to take it easy. After all, she could take care of him if he needed. Errol didn't even reply. He just stood up and left, leaving her steaming with frustration. She wondered why her brother had suddenly become so obsessed with training, ever since coming home covered in bruises. Farah decided to explain. She took her daughter outside and opened a wooden chest. Inside was a pile of broken swords, all snapped and shattered from endless practice. Her daughter's jaw dropped. Farah smiled proudly, saying Errol had been training harder than ever after that duel with the redhead. His determination had reignited her pride as a mother. Seeing that, his sister couldn't stay upset. She promised herself to create a world where classless people like Errol wouldn't be looked down on. Farah chuckled softly. Her daughter had inherited her brother's stubborn heart. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Errol was busy putting his body through hell. Sweat poured down his face as he slammed his wooden sword into a training post over and over. Then, with precise footwork and a deep breath, he unleashed it, the twin slice. The exact move that had beaten him. His blades cut through the air perfectly this time, slicing the post clean in two. He couldn't help but grin. The pain, the bruises, the beatdown from that redhead, it had all been worth it. But the forest had other plans. A goblin hiding in the bushes lunged at him with a club. Errol spun around in an instant, hitting it with the same twin slice and splitting the creature in half. He exhaled, proud of how clean the move felt. That victory moment didn't last long, though. A deep, monstrous roar echoed from behind. Turning around, Errol's heart skipped. A massive hobgoblin stood there, easily twice his size. He thought about running to the village security team, but then a blood-curdling scream rang out nearby. It was familiar. Too familiar. Without thinking, Errol tightened his grip on his sword and sprinted toward the sound. Bursting through the trees, he spotted the redhead, blood dripping from his arm, his sword shaking. And right in front of him loomed the towering hobgoblin, ready to crush him like an ant. Errol quickly pieced it together. The redhead must have been training too, killed some goblins, and accidentally attracted their boss. The redhead backed into a corner, eyes wide as the monster raised its club for the final hit. Errol crouched behind a bush, searching for the perfect opening. He took a deep breath, focusing all his energy. As the hobgoblin swung down, Errol appeared like a flash of light. With one clean motion, he executed the same twin slice. And this time, it wasn't practice. The blade tore through the monster's chest, slicing it down the middle. The hobgoblin collapsed with a thunderous crash, shaking the ground as Errol stood over it, breathing hard but grinning like a badass. And he did it using a skill that supposedly wasn't meant for him. Behind him, the redhead tried to move but stumbled forward, collapsing right into Errol's arms like some kind of awkward romance scene. Turns out the guy's protection blessing had run out, meaning he was one hit away from the afterlife. Errol sighed, asked if he had any holy water left, but the redhead just stared miserably at his shattered bottle on the ground. Typical. So, being the decent human he was, Errol handed him his own holy water. One sip later, the redhead's wounds closed up like magic. But instead of saying thank you like a normal person, the guy looked pissed, mainly because Errol, the so-called classless loser, had just saved his life again. Errol noticed the change in his mood and smirked as the boy grumbled a quiet thanks before immediately grilling him about that insane sword skill. Errol shrugged like it was no big deal and said it was just the twin slice. That made the redhead's eye twitch. He demanded to know how Errol learned a swordsman-exclusive move without even having a class. Errol simply told him the truth. He trained until his body broke, then trained some more. The redhead blinked, confused, so Errol explained that it wasn't about magic or divine blessings. It was about perfect timing, precise footwork, and pure stubbornness. He even admitted that getting his face smashed in by the redhead over and over had helped him figure it out. That one stung. The redhead looked like he'd just been told his life's purpose was training dummy. Still, Errol thanked him for being his best teacher. Unintentionally, of course. Shocked but secretly impressed, the redhead declared a rematch. Errol raised an eyebrow, asking if he was serious after almost dying 5 minutes ago, but the boy insisted. After all, he owed him one for saving his sorry hide. Errol couldn't help but laugh, a little surprised that this prideful brat actually knew how to repay favors. The redhead took offense, snapping that he wasn't that ungrateful. And so, both boys drew their swords once again. The air grew heavy. The forest fell silent. Then, they both unleashed Twin Slice at the exact same moment. Steel clashed in a blur, but Errol's reaction shocked his opponent. He blocked both of the redhead's strikes, and before the kid could even process that, Errol came in with something extra, a third slice. The redhead froze. He blurted out that it's called Twin Slice for a reason. Errol, wiping sweat from his brow, smirked and said that since he didn't have a class limiting him, he could shape his skills however the hell he wanted. This was his first successful triple slice. The redhead just stood there, jaw open, questioning his entire existence. Still not willing to admit defeat, he growled that a real swordsman's technique should never lose to a classless wannabe. Errol just smiled and told him they could test that theory with another match. They reset. The redhead calmed his breathing, thinking he had an edge this time. Speed. Both of them lunged again, twin slices flashing through the air. The redhead braced himself for that third slash, but Errol's movement was faster than before. The blow landed, knocking him down hard despite his block. Errol pointed his sword at him, declaring this outcome was expected. The boy groaned, asking how the hell his third strike was that fast. Errol chuckled and said, ironically, he learned it from him. He explained that he intentionally slowed the first two strikes, then poured all his strength and timing into the third, hitting like a truck when the opponent least expected it. Completely outclassed, the redhead clenched his fists, grinding his teeth in frustration as Errol calmly walked away, victorious yet humble as ever. A few days later, during dinner, Errol's mom Farah casually dropped the news that Captain Evan's son, yes, our redheaded rival, had left to train in the city of Brescia. Errol nearly choked on his food, asking what what the place was. Farah smiled proudly and explained that Brescia was known as the City of Swords, home to some of the best guilds and warriors in the world. She even admitted she'd trained there back in her younger, pre-marriage days. That immediately lit a spark in Errol. If that was where the strong went to grow stronger, then he was going too. Time flashed forward 5 years. Errol was on a carriage headed to Brescia, sharing a ride with two loudmouth swordsmen who couldn't stop arguing. One girl, clearly suffering from delusion, claimed that wearing less clothing made her stronger because it was part of her dual swordsman class. The guy beside her, equally cocky, argued that his class had way more offensive power. Their bickering was so painful that even the driver looked ready to jump off. Before anyone could tell them to shut up, the carriage suddenly screeched to a halt. A horde of wild orcs appeared ahead, and the driver, done with their trash talk, told the two prodigies to prove their strength. Instantly, their bravado died. Faces pale, weapons shaking, they crapped their metaphorical pants as the Orc King itself rose from the crowd. A random lady grabbed the guy's arm for safety, and in true hero fashion, he shoved her aside and bolted. The girl followed right after. Even the driver started turning the wagon to escape. But Errol? He quietly stepped forward. No fear, no hesitation. He unsheathed his sword and sprinted straight into the horde. The driver looked back in shock as Errol cut through orcs like butter, moving so fast he left after images. Then, he disappeared completely before reappearing behind the horde in a spinning blur. Every orc dropped instantly. The driver's jaw hit the floor. That move, Blade Dance, was the signature technique of the legendary sword princess herself. But that made no sense. It was supposed to be exclusive to female class holders, yet here was Errol, a classless dude, pulling it off like it was a Tuesday workout. The Orc King roared, swinging a weapon big enough to crush a house. Errol dodged it effortlessly, leaped high into the air, and drove his sword straight into the monster's skull. The beast fell with a ground-shaking thud, lifeless. Calmly landing, Errol wiped his blade clean and told the dumbstruck driver to take him to Brescia. When the man stammered that Errol was already strong enough, Errol smirked and said he still wanted to get stronger. From the back, a wide-eyed kid asked what class he belonged to, and the entire carriage fell silent when Errol casually revealed that he was completely classless. 5 years earlier, he had shown his mom the twin slice he'd mastered from the redhead's move. She'd been speechless, thinking she was dreaming, but when he explained he was learning new techniques despite having no class, she realized her son was a freak of nature. In a good way, she had proudly taught him her own sword princess techniques before sending him off to chase greatness. Errol's mom had bragged about him to everyone in the family after that, and as the carriage rocked gently toward Brescia, Errol drifted off, dreaming of battles, swords, and glory, until the driver's shout snapped him awake. They had finally arrived at the City of Swords. When Errol finally reached Brescia, the legendary City of Swords, he was stunned. Everywhere he looked, there were swordsmen. Streets filled with shiny armor, smug faces, and more capes than common sense. He could practically smell the arrogance in the air. Looking around, Errol sensed several powerful warriors nearby, their sword auras radiating like neon signs saying, "Try me." Curious, he turned to the carriage driver and asked what class he was. The man awkwardly tried to brush it off, claiming he was just a regular guy. But Errol wasn't buying it. He pointed out that the driver had recognized all his techniques during the orc fight, something only a real pro could do. The driver chuckled nervously, realizing he'd been exposed. He finally admitted that he was actually an advanced holy knight, one of those saintly badasses who could smite demons before breakfast. Errol blinked in surprise and asked what a guy like that was doing driving carriages. The man just sighed, saying he did it to relax between battles. Sometimes you just need a break from saving the world, apparently. Errol nodded, silently respecting that logic. Even heroes needed chill days. Before parting ways, the driver gave Errol some advice. He told him to start by joining a sword guild. Brescia was famous for hosting swordsmanship tournaments where warriors earned money, fame, and occasionally lifelong trauma. But he warned that Errol couldn't participate unless he was part of a registered guild. Hearing that, Errol's eyes lit up. He was ready to get started. After thanking him, Errol stepped into the city, his adventure officially beginning. He soon came across several guild halls. One was Calvary's Guild, recruiting elite knight swordsmen, while another was the Sword Road Guild, open to everyone. He was just about to pick one when chaos found him first, in the form of a girl. Out of nowhere, a girl sprinted toward him, arms wide open like she was about to hug a long-lost lover. Errol dodged on instinct, and she face-planted straight into the ground. She popped back up instantly, red-faced but still grinning, shocked that he'd dodged her without even looking. She muttered something about him having crazy detection skills. Errol just stood there, confused, wondering what kind of circus he'd walked into. The girl quickly switched gears, asking if he wanted to join a guild. Errol nodded out of politeness, and she instantly went into sales mode like some desperate recruiter. She pulled out a crumpled contract and began her pitch, talking so fast she might have memorized it in front of a mirror. Errol took one glance at the paper and started walking away without a word. Panicking, the girl grabbed his belt, demanding to know why he was leaving. Errol sighed and told her flat out she looked too desperate. He assumed her guild must be weak if she had to drag people off the street. Offended, she puffed her chest out, not that it made much difference, and tried to act like her guild was a big deal. Errol wasn't convinced. Realizing she was losing him, the girl introduced herself as Lilia and even offered him a date if he joined. Errol barely blinked and told her he wasn't interested. That hit harder than any sword strike. Lilia froze, visibly short-circuiting from the rejection. Errol thought she was just like his older sister, loud, overconfident, and about as flat as a wooden board. Trying to change the topic, Errol asked her which guild was the biggest in Brescia. Lilia, still recovering from the ego damage, glared at him before sighing dramatically. She told him that Blackblade Guild was the top dog in the city, boasting 8 A-ranked swordsmen. Errol thanked her and immediately walked off, leaving Lilia fuming behind him. He soon arrived at Blackblade's massive headquarters, which looked more like a castle than a guild hall. A guard stopped him and asked his business. Errol said he wanted to join, and the guard directed him to take the entry test. Errol followed and waited in line until his turn came up. When he reached the counter, the receptionist, a man who clearly loved his own voice, explained that only people with advanced classes could apply. Errol said he was classless but still wanted to take the test. The receptionist burst out laughing like he'd just heard the world's funniest joke and told him to leave. People around began whispering, mocking Errol for even trying. Staying calm, Errol asked again, saying he was confident in his skills. But the receptionist refused, repeating the rule like a broken NPC. Before Errol could argue further, a few A-ranked swordsmen walked into the room, glowing like literal celebrities. The receptionist's tone changed instantly, his fake politeness returning as he ignored Errol completely. Realizing this place was full of arrogant clowns, Errol quietly turned and left. He tried visiting other guilds, but it was the same story everywhere. No class, no chance. By the end of the day, even his optimism had taken a hit. But then he remembered something, the letter his mother had given him before he left home. Back then, he'd thought it was just her being overprotective, but now it all made sense. She knew this would happen. Determined, Errol decided to find her old guild. As he was walking, Lilia reappeared out of nowhere like an annoying pop-up ad, begging him again to join her guild. He kept walking, ignoring her entirely. She got so desperate she yelled that she'd lick his boots if he joined. The whole street went dead silent. Townsfolk gave her the most disgusted looks imaginable, while Errol simply walked away faster, pretending he didn't know her. Lilia clenched her fists, vowing she'd make him join one way or another. After searching for a while, Errol finally found the place his mother had mentioned, a once grand building that had clearly seen better days. Just as he approached, Lilia popped up again, out of breath. She proudly pointed to the massive headquarters behind her, saying this was her guild. Errol blinked. That big and still weak? He couldn't believe it. Lilia admitted that her guild had lost its former glory, but she was determined to rebuild it. She introduced it as the Dragonfang Guild, once led by the legendary Dual Swords King. Hearing that name, Errol's eyes widened. His mother had told him stories about training in that very guild back in her youth. That was enough to get his interest. So, he agreed to go inside. Lilia led him into a grand but dusty hall and offered him a seat. Before she could continue her recruitment speech, a drunk man suddenly rose from the sofa, waving a bottle and yelling nonsense. Lilia's face turned red with embarrassment as she yelled at him, reminding him that the doctor had forbidden him from drinking, not to mention they couldn't even afford alcohol. The man just laughed, clearly not giving a damn. Errol finally realized who he was, the Dual Swords King himself, the legendary warrior, now a one-armed alcoholic. The man glanced at Errol, scoffed, and told him to leave while he still could, saying this guild was finished. Lilia tried to stop him, but her father just ignored her and walked away like a retired celebrity who hated fan interactions. When things calmed down, Lilia explained that her father had once been one of Brescia's top swordsmen, but after losing his arm, his career and the guild both went downhill. She sighed, convinced that Errol would leave too. But instead, Errol said he'd join. Lilia froze like her brain blue-screened. She thought he was joking, but Errol explained that every other guild had rejected him anyway. She squealed with joy, grabbed the contract and handed it to him immediately. After he signed, she glanced at his paperwork and nearly fainted. She finally noticed the part that said, "Class, none." Her smile disappeared. For a second, she just stood there, then calmly drew her sword and threatened to give him a new class, the deceased one. Errol blinked, confused. She demanded to know why a classless guy dared join her guild, saying she needed real swordsmen, not freeloaders. But deep down, she was mostly just mad that the guy who roasted her earlier was actually joining her guild, and that he was still stronger than her. Just when Errol thought his new guild couldn't get any weirder, a woman walked in, elegant, serious, and with an aura that screamed, "I'm the adult here." Her name was Rhiannour. Before she could even say a word, Lilia jumped straight into her arms like a clingy puppy and whined that a classless scammer had tried to trick her. Rhiannour looked over at Errol, froze for a second, and immediately recognized him. Errol blinked in confusion. Rhiannour smiled and said they were from the same hometown. She even reminded him that they used to spar when they were kids. Errol stared blankly, trying to remember, and shook his head. Rhiannour looked offended. She clarified that they'd met 5 years ago. That's when Errol tilted his head, smiled, and said he'd never forget a beauty like her. The flirty comment hit harder than her sword. Her face turned as red as her hair. Then, it finally clicked for him. That red-headed brat he fought years ago was her. Errol's eyes widened in realization, and Rhiannour proudly confirmed it. She was Captain Evans' daughter and his only child. Errol immediately apologized for not recognizing her. Rhiannour laughed it off, saying her long hair probably threw him off. Errol, ever the menace, thought to himself that it wasn't her hair that changed, it was her figure. His eyes instinctively drifted south. making her frown as if she could read his mind. Before the awkward tension could escalate, Lilia interrupted, asking if this was really the same classless boy who beat Rhiannour years ago. Rhiannour nodded, and Lilia gasped, half in disbelief, half in excitement. But Rhiannour wasn't laughing. Her pride was still scarred from that defeat, and she wasn't planning to let it slide. She clenched her fists and declared she wanted a rematch. Moments later, the three of them arrived at the guild's training ground. Lilia acted as referee while Rhiannour stepped forward, determination blazing in her eyes. She admitted that Errol was strong, but this time she wouldn't lose. Errol smirked slightly, feeling the tension in the air. The match began. Rhiannour charged first, swinging with a twin slice that glimmered in the sunlight. Errol, confident as ever, thought he could block it easily. Big mistake. The attack hit him square in the chest, sending him stumbling back. He looked down, stunned. His parry hadn't worked. Rhiannour tossed her heavy sword aside and explained with pride that her weapon was 5 times heavier than normal. No way his technique could counter her brute strength. She revealed that she had awakened a brute swordsman class, which multiplied her power to ridiculous levels. Errol, still catching his breath, admitted she definitely leveled up since their last fight. The battle grew intense. Rhiannour's slashes were fierce, each swing heavy enough to break bones. Errol had to step back repeatedly, muttering that if he kept taking hits like this, he'd lose. What confused him was how casually she was revealing her strategies mid-battle. When he asked why, Rhiannour simply said beating him fair and square was worth the risk. That confidence made Errol grin. He told her power was nice and all, but she still couldn't keep up with his speed. Then he disappeared. One moment he was in front of her, the next gone. Rhiannour's eyes darted around, and before she could react, Errol reappeared behind her and struck her neck with the blunt of his sword. She spun around in shock. What the hell just happened? Errol explained that what she saw was just a shadow after image. It was a move from the Supreme Swordsman technique, a style so advanced that even elite warriors struggled to master it. Rhiannour stood frozen, realizing that the same guy everyone mocked for being classless had somehow learned a supreme level skill. She tried again, attacking in a flurry of rage, but Errol dodged every hit effortlessly. When she demanded to know how, he shrugged and said, "Just move faster." That line made her want to punch him more than ever. Errol chuckled, admitting it wasn't that simple. It had taken him years of hard work and broken bones to get it right. In a blur, he vanished again, striking her from different angles. But to his surprise, his blows didn't deal any real damage. Rhiannour smirked. She proudly explained that power swordsmen had enhanced defense as part of their class. Errol raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed, but not intimidated. When she came at him again, he sidestepped and countered with a perfectly timed strike, one he'd learned from his mother. Rhiannour froze mid-attack, and then her knees hit the ground. She'd lost. Lilia, still shocked by what she'd just witnessed, slowly raised her hand and declared Errol the winner. Rhiannour's face twisted in frustration. She had trained for 5 long years and she still couldn't beat him. Errol walked over, praised her growth, and said she'd gotten way stronger. Then, in true Errol fashion, added that he was just stronger. But that broke her even more. Rhiannour's eyes welled up with tears, but she tried to hide it. Lilia rushed in, glaring at Errol for making her cry. He looked confused. He'd literally just complimented her. Rhiannour turned away, pretending she wasn't crying, before running back to the guild. But a few seconds later, loud sobs echoed from inside, proving otherwise. After that emotional mess, Lilia's mood did a complete 180. She happily accepted Errol into the guild, pretending like she'd believed in him all along. Errol glanced at her skeptically, remembering how she'd threatened to kill him 5 minutes earlier. But he let it go and asked why the guild was in such bad shape. Lilia sighed and awkwardly admitted they were in debt. Errol leaned closer to hear the number, and when she whispered it, even he looked shocked. But Lilia quickly said it wasn't hopeless. They could pay everything off if they won an upcoming tournament. She explained that they needed 3 members to compete. Errol asked why Rhiannour was even staying with such a small-time guild. Lilia told him the truth. When Rhiannour first came to Brescia, every major guild rejected her. Her father, however, had seen potential in her and offered her a place at Dragonfang when no one else would. Out of gratitude, she stayed loyal ever since. Hearing that, Errol nodded with respect. He told Lilia that winning the tournament would be a piece of cake, but Lilia didn't look so sure. The tournament teams had up to 5 members and they only had 3. 1 drunk, 1 armed man, 1 emotionally unstable girl, and a classless freak. Not exactly dream team material. Still, Errol's eyes gleamed with excitement. He didn't care about odds or risks. This was what he came for. To fight stronger opponents and prove that class or no class, he could surpass them all. And watching silently from the shadows, Lilia's father, the old guildmaster, smiled faintly, recognizing Errol's potential. The next morning, Errol woke up in an unfamiliar room, blinking at the ceiling like a man who'd just respawned in someone else's house. Then it hit him. He was now living in the Dragonfang Guild, the most broke yet somehow functional guild in all of Brescia. He stretched, yawned, and stepped out into the main hall. where Lilia and Rhiannour were already sitting at the breakfast table. Lilia greeted him with a grin and asked if he'd slept well. Errol nodded, saying it was the first time in ages he'd slept on an actual bed instead of the cold ground. Rhiannour, on the other hand, sat there completely silent, poking her food like it had wronged her. Errol side-eyed her, wondering if she was still salty about losing their last duel. Before he could open his mouth, Lilia clapped her hands with a burst of excitement. She proudly announced that Dragonfang was finally registered for the upcoming guild tournament. The girl was practically vibrating with energy. Errol tilted his head, asking if winning the tournament would really earn enough cash to cover all their mountain of debt. Lilia nodded and began explaining the rules like an overexcited teacher. The goal was simple: wipe out every member of the opposing guild to claim victory. Easy on paper, hell in practice? Rhiannour immediately frowned, pointing out that they were massively outnumbered. Most guilds had 5-man teams, while they barely had 3 functioning humans. Still, Lilia brushed it off with that fake optimism she was famous for, saying that there was a low chance they'd run into any A-ranked monsters in human form. Trying to stay positive, she reminded them that both she and Rhiannour were B-ranked swordsmen, which technically made them strong. Errol blinked, confused as hell. Rankings? Letters? What kind of alphabet soup logic was this? Rhiannour rolled her eyes so hard they almost left orbit. She explained that swordsmen were ranked from D to A based on skill and strength. There were only 20 A ranks in all of Brescia, so being a B rank was actually impressive. Lilia gave a proud little smirk, clearly satisfied with herself. Despite Errol's absurd strength, neither of them suspected he was anywhere close to A rank since the gap between ranks was huge. Then, like she just remembered something life-changing, Lilia gasped and said the match pairings were being announced. Without waiting another second, she bolted out of the room like her rent depended on it. As she disappeared, Rhiannour stood up too. Errol, curious, asked where she was going. She said she was off to train. Errol followed her with that "I've got a dumb idea" look in his eyes. He asked her to confirm that she was a power bladesman, then pressed further. Did she have any special skills aside from raw strength? Rhiannour proudly mentioned her unique ability, Guts, a skill that boosted her protection barrier and kept her standing when normal fighters would have been face down in the dirt. That instantly caught Errol's attention. He grabbed her hand suddenly, saying he wanted to learn it too. Rhiannour blinked, cheeks turning red, thinking this was some weird confession moment. But then Errol told her to beat him up with her sword, the sheathed one, thankfully. Rhiannour just stared at him like he'd lost his damn mind. Errol told her that pain builds connection and that getting smacked around by her would make them closer. She backed away, saying she wasn't into whatever freaky crap he was talking about. He sighed and explained that he only wanted to copy her Guts ability, reasoning that the best way to master endurance was to, well, endure getting wrecked. Rhiannour facepalmed. She reminded him that class skills were blessings from the goddess, not something you could just copy-paste by brute force. But then Errol mentioned that he'd already learned Twin Slice and Shadow Step without any class at all. That shut her right up. So she reluctantly led him to the training ground. When Errol asked to try her heavy sword, Rhiannour smirked. That thing weighed 5 times more than normal. No way he'd even lift it. Then, to her horror, Errol casually picked it up like it was a stick. She was stunned, and he gave her that smug smile, saying it was thanks to countless hours of practice. He was confident he could learn her gut skill the same way. For the first time, Rhiannour actually respected his dedication. She took a deep breath, drew her weapon, and warned that she wouldn't hold back. Errol grinned, calling her a strong woman from his hometown, which, of course, made her blush like crazy again. Then, training began, or more accurately, Errol's daily beating began. While Rhiannour was busy smacking him around, Lilia came running down the stairs screaming like the world was ending. She waved a paper in her hand and shouted that their first tournament match was against Blackblade, the strongest guild in the entire city. Lilia collapsed dramatically, crying that their enemies were basically a bunch of monsters in human form led by the scummiest man alive, George, a man infamous for crushing weaker guilds just for fun. Still, even in her panic, Lilia clenched her fists and said they'd face their fate head on. Then she noticed Rhiannour still hitting Errol and screamed at her to stop, thinking they were fighting out of frustration. Rhiannour rolled her eyes, explaining it was training, but Lilia didn't buy it. Errol just laid on the ground groaning that he was starving. Lilia shoved a bottle of holy water into his face and told him to drink it instead of whining. Days passed, and before they knew it, tournament day had arrived. The massive Brescia Coliseum was packed with thousands of screaming spectators. Errol looked around, amazed by the crowd and the size of the arena. Nearby, he overheard some audience members talking about their match. Most were betting against Dragonfang, calling them a joke. Lilia's eyebrow twitched, ready to throw hands, but Rhiannour held her back before she caused a scene. Then, Errol noticed the betting board. Their odds were 20 to 1. Lilia's jaw clenched while Errol said that was actually a really high number. Lilia facepalmed. Nobody expected them to win, but instead of sulking, she suddenly grinned like a maniac. That's when she revealed her brilliant plan. She'd mortgaged her house and bet all their savings on themselves. If they somehow beat Blackblade, they'd be rich overnight. If they lost, well, they were homeless anyway, so what's the difference? Might as well go out in style. Then, as if summoned by their misery, George, the smug leader of Blackblade, walked over. He smiled with fake sympathy, praising Lilia for keeping her father's dying guild alive. He even brought up the classless hero she recruited, pretending to be impressed. Lilia glared, knowing damn well he was mocking her. George, however, kept that slimy grin plastered on his face, claiming he was simply sad to see Dragonfang fall so low. And just like that, the stage was set. A broke guild of 3 misfits versus the most powerful swordsman in the city. The crowd laughed, the bets were placed, and Errol, well, he cracked his neck and smiled. If they wanted a show, he was about to give them one. George stood tall in front of Lilia, wearing that smug smile only villains and tax collectors could pull off. He told her that he personally arranged this match because the crowd would go wild seeing the old strongest guild face off against the new strongest. Then, with a fake gentleman's tone, he claimed he'd even given her a chance to make some money off the bets, before laughing and saying it didn't matter anyway, since she'd never beat his A-ranked swordsman. Lilia clenched her fists so hard her knuckles cracked, spitting that Dragonfang would crush him. George just chuckled and strutted away like a man who already wrote her obituary. Watching the whole exchange, Errol couldn't help but note how that guy managed to mock people politely, like he insulted you and complimented you at the same time. Moments later, the Coliseum roared to life. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena, hyping up the crowd for what was clearly going to be a massacre. Errol glanced around and noticed George wasn't even stepping onto the field. For a second, he thought the guy might actually be merciful, but Lilia quickly reminded him that all of George's members were A-ranked. Rhiannour nodded grimly. This wasn't mercy, this was a power flex. Errol just smirked. He was actually excited to see what A-ranks were capable of. The announcer finally called the first match. Blackblade's Geo versus Dragonfang's classless hero, Errol. As Errol stepped into the arena, the crowd went off, not cheering, laughing. People whispered that Dragonfang must have lost their minds for sending out a classless weakling against an A-rank. Even Geo, his opponent, looked bored out of his skull, thinking this would be the easiest paycheck of his life. As soon as the match began, Geo blurred forward with a teleport move and stabbed Errol right in the chest, or so he thought. Lilia gasped, but Rhiannour calmly said it was just a shadow clone. The fake Errol vanished into mist, leaving Geo's grin frozen mid-smug. He spun around and stabbed again, another shadow. Then he blinked, realizing there were 2 Errols now. Confused but still cocky, Geo activated his blink dash, slicing through both. But before he could even flex, a 3rd Errol appeared behind him. In a panic, Geo wiped out all 3, only to realize none were real. The actual Errol was already beneath him, delivering a clean knockout strike. Geo hit the ground like a sack of potatoes, eyes wide. He stammered, asking how the hell Errol could make 3 shadows. Errol shrugged and said his mom could make 5, without even trying. The audience went nuts. The announcer declared the winner, and the entire stadium erupted in disbelief. Lilia screamed with joy while Rhiannour stared at Errol like she just witnessed divine power. Even the medics carrying Geo away looked scared. Errol dusted himself off, thinking he still needed practice to copy Geo's critical strike technique. Meanwhile, whispers spread through the stands. How could a classless kid just wipe an A-rank? Before anyone recovered, the second match started. The next swordsman lunged at Errol, but Errol parried every hit like he was swatting flies, then ended the fight instantly with Twin Slice. Another knockout. The third challenger, a dagger user, tried to rush in with close combat. Bad idea. Errol vanished and reappeared behind him like a ghost before decking him in the back of the head. 3 matches, 3 wins. The crowd was stunned. Even Rhiannour whispered to Lilia, asking why she wasn't fighting. Lilia just crossed her arms and said, "Because I like living." Then came the 4th fight, against a shield bearer built like a walking fortress. Errol dodged the man's every move, earning a snarl from the opponent who accused him of faking being classless. Errol smirked and said he'd just worked his ass off to get this far. The man scoffed, saying classes can't be surpassed with effort alone. Then he feinted with a sword swing and charged with his shield. But Errol predicted it perfectly and countered with foresight, sending the man stumbling backward. The crowd gasped as the shield flew from his hands. The guy realized Errol had learned his counter technique just from watching him. Errol tested it again, landing a perfect counter kick, then picked up the shield himself. The opponent charged in rage and Errol sidestepped, slamming him down with his own move. The announcer shouted Errol's 4th consecutive victory and the entire arena went silent. People began questioning if he was truly classless. The organizers demanded proof. Errol calmly handed over his class card and the announcer inserted it into the crystal ball. The orb glowed, confirming it. He really was classless. George started sweating bullets. Rhiannour whispered that maybe they actually had a chance. Lilia nearly fainted, not from stress, but from regret. If she'd known Errol was this strong, she would have bet the family dog too. Rhiannour wondered how on earth he'd trained like this in just 5 years. Lilia, meanwhile, was already daydreaming about marrying him, muttering that even if the guild went bankrupt, she'd rebuild it with love. Errol noticed her creepy aura and instinctively stepped back. Then the announcer called the final match, Blackblade's master, Masamune, versus Dragonfang's classless hero. The crowd hushed. Masamune stepped forward, drawing a katana, and Rhiannour instantly recognized him as a rare samurai-class swordsman. No one had ever seen him fight before, clearly George's secret weapon. The two squared off. Masamune didn't move an inch, calmly resting his hand on his blade. Errol felt the pressure in the air. This guy wasn't normal. Masamune smirked, saying he was just waiting for Errol to get close so he could finish it in one strike. Errol grinned and started walking forward, saying standing still wasn't his style. Masamune warned that once he drew his blade, Errol wouldn't even see the attack coming. Errol told him that was fine, he just wanted to see it up close. In a flash, Masamune drew his sword, slicing with blinding speed. The audience gasped, but Errol vanished right before impact. The samurai froze. Behind him, Errol appeared calmly saying that Masamune's speed was impressive, but his teacher, the Sword Princess herself, was far faster. Then Errol unleashed Piercing Tempest, the legendary Sword Princess finisher, tearing through Masamune's defense and slamming him into the dirt. Silence filled the arena before the announcer declared Errol the winner. The entire crowd lost their minds. Bets were ruined, people screamed, and the Black Blade Guild's fans demanded refunds. Rhiannour and Lilia rushed to celebrate while Errol just stood there, looking chill as ever. Lilia tried to hug him, but he instinctively sidestepped, letting her crash to the ground. He apologized, saying it was just reflex. His older sister used to ambush him like that. Lilia, still on the floor, just laughed, thinking about all the money they'd won. Rhiannour, flustered, opened her arms for a hug too, until she realized how awkward she looked and froze. Errol grinned, saying he wouldn't mind hugging her without the armor. Lilia instantly jumped up to volunteer instead, so he dodged her again. As the crowd cheered their underdog victory, George clenched his teeth so hard it echoed through the arena. The Great Black Blade Guild had just been humiliated by a classless kid, and judging by the look in his eyes, he wasn't going to let that slide. That was episode 3. Subscribe if you don't want to miss what happens when revenge, rivalry, and chaos collide in the next part. That evening, when the Dragonfang trio returned to their guild house, the place instantly turned into a party zone, and Lilia was already 3 mugs deep. Errol couldn't believe she was actually old enough to drink. She looked more like a middle schooler than a guild leader, but the Short Queen proudly claimed she was a grown woman, despite having a flat chest. Still, she couldn't stop fangirling over Errol. After all, he had just single-handedly demolished 5 A-ranked swordsmen, members of the strongest guild in the nation. To her, this man wasn't just a hero, he was a golden ticket out of poverty. So, with the confidence of a drunk romantic and the desperation of a broke businesswoman, she suddenly asked for Errol's hand in marriage. She even promised she could fulfill all his desires, though judging by her size, no one was sure what that meant. But Errol, being the certified Sigma male that he was, turned her down instantly. He casually said he preferred someone like Rhiannour instead. That line hit harder than any sword. Rhiannour's face turned bright red as she stood up, yelling at him to stop talking nonsense just to reject Lilia. But Errol wasn't joking. He said it completely seriously. When Rhiannour asked why he was teasing her, he reminded her that years ago, during their childhood sparring, she used to complain that he called her a boy. She pouted, saying everyone who met her said she had no womanly charm. Errol smirked and glanced down, saying he could clearly see 2 very convincing reasons to disagree. That made Rhiannour blush even more, while Lilia realized that Rhiannour still had no clue how dangerous she could be if she actually leaned into that strength. Not one to give up, Lilia decided to make her move again. She leaned close to Errol, rubbing his leg, and said he must be tired from all the fighting, suggesting he join her in the bedroom. But Lilia just gave a sly smile and claimed she was talking about a massage. To everyone's surprise, Errol said he'd rather get a massage from Rhiannour. His idea of a massage is like getting beaten half to death in the training yard. Within minutes, the two were out there sparring like maniacs under the moonlight, while Lilia watched from the balcony, wondering if Errol even knew what the word massage meant. Their chaos woke up Lilia's father, the legendary ex-Dual Swords King, who stumbled downstairs, hungover and irritated. He barked at them to stop venting their loser frustration in the middle of the night. But when Lilia proudly told him they had actually won, and against the Black Blade Guild no less, he froze. Thinking it was a joke, he said the other guild probably sent their B or C rank rookies. Lilia corrected him with a grin. All 5 were A ranked, and Errol soloed every one of them. That snapped Rod sober instantly. He stared at the beaten up but smiling Errol like he was seeing a myth come to life. Lilia bragged that she'd also made a ton of bets and hit the jackpot, meaning their guild was now debt-free and rolling in extra cash. But Rod wasn't impressed. He grumbled that even if Errol was that strong, someone would soon poach him away to a richer guild. Lilia waved it off confidently, saying she'd secure Errol soon by marrying him. Errol immediately shot that down, saying no way in hell. Then, turning to her dad, he said that while Lilia might be loud and a bit dumb, at least she wasn't someone who gave up easily. That comment didn't go unnoticed. It was a direct jab at Rod. The old man's expression darkened. Errol, completely unaware of the danger, kept going. He told Rod to stop sulking and start acting like a swordsman again, since he still had one good hand to fight with. Rod's face twitched. Seconds, he grabbed Errol by the collar and growled that a dual-wielding swordsman without 2 swords was nothing but useless. But Errol shot back, saying that even a classless swordsman like him was still fighting and rising higher, so there was no excuse for giving up. Rod's glare lingered before he shoved Errol away and went back upstairs silently. Lilia apologized for her father's behavior, but Errol brushed it off, saying the man was still incredibly strong. It was just a waste to see him throw that strength away. Deep down, Errol decided that no matter what, he'd motivate Rod to pick up the sword again. When Lilia overheard him talking about learning new skills, she suggested he try clearing dungeons nearby. Then she mentioned the Sword God Cup, a national tournament where the best swordsmen competed to prove who was number one. That immediately caught Errol's attention. Before he could ask more, Lilia pulled out a form and told him to sign it if he wanted to enter. But Errol narrowed his eyes, realizing she was up to something. Without hesitation, he ripped the paper apart. Rhiannour gasped, asking if he didn't want to join, but Errol said the paper wasn't a tournament entry, it was a damn marriage certificate. Lilia laughed nervously, saying she was just testing the waters. Errol, however, was done playing around. He grabbed her into a rear-naked choke, telling her she needed a lesson in boundaries. The next morning, Errol woke up to find Lilia trying to climb onto his bed. He dodged instantly, tied her up like a criminal, and left the room before she could pull any more stunts. Later that day, the trio headed to the city's dungeon teleportation hub. Lilia explained how adventurers use the magic circles to jump to levels they had already reached. She proudly said she'd cleared up to level 12, while Rhiannour flexed her level 14 record. Errol, of course, immediately said he wanted to go to level 14 too, but Lilia told him it didn't work like that. He had to physically reach a level before he could teleport back to it. That crushed his excitement, but Lilia quickly added that she knew a shortcut to reach lower floors faster. Errol agreed, but when Lilia tried to ditch Rhiannour, saying he didn't need two guides, he caught onto her scheme and insisted Rhiannour come too. As soon as they entered the first floor, two armored knights attacked. Errol drew his blade, clashing with one while Rhiannour handled the other. Despite their heavy armor, the knights moved with unnatural speed. Errol used dash step, slicing one's head off, but to his horror, the body kept moving. He realized the suits were empty, animated by dungeon mana. Rhiannour warned him that they didn't feel pain or have weak points, so Errol switched tactics, cutting off its legs instead. The knight collapsed instantly. Rhiannour finished hers as well, saying they'd regenerate soon, so they needed to move deeper. But before moving any deeper into the dungeon, Errol turned to Lilia and asked what her class was. She proudly puffed up her chest, what little of it she had, and announced that she was a fencer. Then, with her usual shameless grin, she said she could teach him anything he wanted, whether it be in the training ground or, in the bed. Errol immediately rejected her again and walked off, leaving her speechless. Before they could descend to the next level, they suddenly heard faint cries for help echoing from beyond a nearby door. When they rushed over, they found a man kneeling on the ground, drenched in blood, begging them to save his friends who were still trapped inside. Rhiannour suggested they take him back to the surface, but the man refused, saying his party got caught in a booby trap and were still alive somewhere inside. Lilia, being Lilia, went straight to business. She demanded payment up front before helping. Surprisingly, the man didn't hesitate and handed her a good chunk of money, apparently from gambling winnings. But as they followed him, Errol's instincts started buzzing. He noticed that a guy losing that much blood shouldn't even be able to walk, much less lead them through a dungeon. Something was off. He quickly realized the injuries were fake. Still, instead of exposing him, Errol decided to play along, mostly out of curiosity and because he thought it might get entertaining. The man led them to a hidden chamber with trails of blood smeared on the floor and a glowing puddle at the center. In the middle of it sat a single gold coin. Lilia's eyes sparkled like a greedy goblin's, and before anyone could stop her, she reached for it. Instantly, a teleportation circle flared up beneath their feet. Everyone realized too late it was a trap, even the scammer himself, who screamed as he got teleported along with them. They landed on a floor deeper than any Rhiannour had ever seen, even beyond level 14 passing. The man started shaking, saying that this was the lowest floor of the dungeon, where the mythical sword god was said to reside. Before they could question him further, a massive armored knight appeared before them, its body radiating rainbow-colored light. Lilia immediately called Cap. She didn't believe the sword god class was real, but Errol could already feel the pressure in the air. This was no joke. He shoved Lilia to the ground, just as the knight unleashed a devastating aerial slash that ripped through the dungeon walls like paper. Without wasting a second, the sword god lunged at Errol. He barely managed to block the first strike, though it sent him flying into a wall. His arms trembled, realizing he only survived thanks to all that brutal reinforcement training Rhiannour put him through. Errol charged forward again, swinging his blade, but the knight dodged with inhuman speed and countered with advanced sword techniques that blurred through the air. Instead of panicking, Errol grinned, calling it the perfect chance to test himself. His party looked at him like he'd lost his mind, but Errol activated Divine Step, vanishing in a flash to close the distance. He unleashed a flurry of attacks, forcing the sword god to back off. Then the knight raised its hand, and suddenly, the gravity in the entire room multiplied. Lilia and Rhiannour dropped to the floor instantly, unable to move, but Errol stood firm. He'd been through worse, specifically his mother's training sessions, where he could barely stand under her pressure. This time, he wasn't about to lose. The sword god raised its blade for another swing, but Errol pulled the gold coin from earlier and used it to nullify the gravity field for just a moment. That brief opening was all he needed. He unleashed his strongest move, Infinite Break, slicing through the night with enough force to shatter the air itself. Lilia and Rhiannour just stared in disbelief. Errol caught his breath, downed some holy water, and calmly activated a teleport spell to bring them all back to the surface. Later that night, back in the city, Lilia's father, Rod, was drinking himself half dead at a tavern again. Nearby, 3 loudmouth adventurers bragged about how they tricked Dragonfang's rookies into a dungeon trap and that they were probably never coming back. Rod slammed his fist into their table, shattering it, and demanded they explain everything. But before he could throttle them, George showed up, mocking him as a washed-up drunk. The moment Rod saw him, everything clicked. George had set the whole thing up. His heart sank, believing his daughter was gone for good. He lunged at George, but the man easily shoved him aside. Rod fell to his knees, broken, cursing his own weakness. Just then, a familiar voice called out from the doorway. When Rod looked up, there stood Lilia, Rhiannour, and Errol, all alive and casually talking about being hungry. Lilia froze when she saw her father, and Rod immediately ran over, hugging her tightly in tears. Rhiannour glared at George and accused him of orchestrating the trap. She said one of his lackeys confessed everything, but George denied it smoothly, saying everyone's responsible for their own safety in the dungeon. Errol, strangely enough, said he kinda had a point, which earned him a death glare from both girls. Rod swore George wouldn't get away with it, but George just laughed, calling him a pathetic drunk and walking out. Errol simply sighed, knowing this wouldn't be the last of George's tricks. A few days later, a scroll arrived at Dragonfang, the preliminary match brackets for the Sword God tournament. When Lilia opened it, her heart sank. She was in the same bracket as Errol, meaning her chances of winning were exactly 0. Errol looked confused about how prelims worked, so Rhiannour explained that since thousands of swordsmen joined, the city split them into random brackets. Winners of each group got tickets to the main tournament. She also thanked the gods that she wasn't in Errol's group, because she'd get shredded instantly. While she prayed for easy opponents, Errol teased her for having daddy issues. Lilia cut them off, saying it was time to hit the dungeon again for training. Errol groaned, saying he was tired of dungeons. But Lilia batted her eyes, saying she needed a strong man to protect her. Before they could leave, Rod appeared dramatically, hugging his daughter and warning her to be careful. George could strike again at any time. She promised she'd be safe and walked out. Rod caught Errol's judgmental look and awkwardly said he was trying to be a better dad. Errol smiled and said, "It's never too late to start acting like one." Weeks later, the preliminaries finally began. The arena erupted with cheers as countless swordsmen clashed. Slowly, the weak were weeded out, and predictably, Lilia lost before even facing Errol. She sulked in the corner while Errol roasted her, saying she was worried for nothing. She would have lost anyway. Crushed, Lilia still wished him luck, warning that his next opponent was a tricky one, a red-haired magic swordsman who could channel mana into her blade. Errol raised an eyebrow, surprised that magic was even allowed. Lilia shrugged, saying all you needed to enter was a guild badge. When the match began, his opponent proudly introduced herself and warned him not to whine about magic being unfair. Errol smiled and said he didn't care. The best fighter would win. The fight started with the girl hurling fireballs non-stop. Errol dodged and deflected them like it was a dance, weaving through explosions until he finally got close enough to strike. She blocked, using another blast to push him back. He smirked, saying it must be convenient switching from melee to range so easily. She called him a classless loser who couldn't possibly beat her. Errol calmly replied that knowing both magic and swordsmanship didn't make her a master of either. Furious, she poured fire into her blade until it blazed red hot, forming a flaming sword boasting that only a true magic swordsman could wield it. She swung, and Errol just sighed, sidestepping the fire like it was nothing before slashing back with his own counterattack. Even Errol had to admit that predicting the red-haired girl's next move was a nightmare. Her sword swings were fast, but her footwork looked like she was trying to dance on invisible marbles. Still, he respected the effort, saying she clearly trained hard, just not smart. After a few minutes, Errol decided to end this circus. He stopped moving altogether and began effortlessly deflecting every flaming strike without even taking a single step. The crowd gasped. The man literally stood there like a statue while her flames fizzled out against his blade. He told her that even though her swordsmanship was better than Lilia's, it was still sloppy, like a fancy move set without any real depth. At this level, he said, she was barely stronger than the tutorial NPCs. That roast hit her harder than his sword could. Enraged and humiliated, she lost her cool completely. That's when Errol saw his chance. He unleashed a twin slash so clean that it sliced straight through her flaming blade and snuffed out her fire like a candle. Before she could even process what just happened, he blink-stepped behind her and smacked her in the head with his sword hilt, knocking her out cold. The crowd exploded in cheers as the announcer declared Errol the winner of the 4th block. But while everyone celebrated, Errol was already thinking about how to copy and master her flame techniques, because of course he was. A few days passed, and the day of the final tournament finally arrived. Lilia barged into her father's room, yelling at him to wake up so they could go cheer for both Errol and Rhiannour, who had also made it into the main event. Her father, Rod, just groaned and told her to go by herself. She tried to bait him into coming by, mentioning that maybe he was scared to see George there. That hit a nerve. Rod instantly sat up, insisting he wasn't scared of that bastard. But then his shoulders slumped, and he admitted quietly that he'd tried picking up his sword yesterday and realized just how rusty he'd become. She scolded him for acting pitiful, reminding him that even in his condition, he could still go toe-to-toe with finalists while others trained their whole lives and didn't even qualify. That fired him up again, and he finally agreed to go watch. On the way to the stadium, Rod thought about how he once trained Rian Noor when he still had both arms. He felt a strange mix of pride and nostalgia, wondering how his student would perform now. Meanwhile, inside the tournament grounds, Rian Noor was nervously tapping her leg, clearly on edge. She looked like she wanted to throw up. Out of nowhere, Errol popped up behind her, asking if she was scared that their first match might be against each other. She jumped, blushed, and tried to punch him, right as the judges announced the first match of the main event, Errol versus George, the reigning champion. Rian Noor wished him luck, and Errol headed to the arena. Lilia yelled from the stands, telling him to kick that bastard's ass into 64 pieces. But as soon as George walked into the light, Errol froze. Something was wrong. His eyes glowed purple, fangs jutted out of his mouth, and a dark horn protruded from his forehead. He looked less like a man and more like someone who made a deal with the devil. Rod immediately realized what had happened. He saw the sword in George's hand and shouted for Errol to retreat. That weapon was cursed. Inside it was trapped a powerful demon. George's voice even sounded distorted as he laughed, saying he didn't expect anyone to recognize him. Rod explained that George wasn't speaking. It was the demon inside him. That blade was once the legendary sword of the sword god used to slay the Demon King ages ago. But before dying, the Demon King cursed the blade itself, turning it into a prison for his soul. The sword was supposed to be sealed away forever. The demon smirked and introduced himself as Gelda, the destroyer of mankind. He said he had waited centuries for someone greedy enough to set him free, and George was that fool. The entire stadium erupted into panic. Even Rian Noor stepped outside, saying she thought Gelda was just a bedtime myth. The monster said to have nearly destroyed the entire world. As chaos broke out and people tried to flee, Gelda raised his hand. A massive magic circle lit up beneath the arena, forming a shimmering dome that trapped everyone inside. He laughed like a maniac, saying human screams were the sweetest music he'd ever heard, and he planned to enjoy every note before killing them all. But in the middle of all that, one person didn't move, Errol. Gelda sneered, telling him to run if he valued his life, but Errol calmly replied that he didn't need to, because the demon had already been defeated once before, which meant he wasn't invincible. The demon burst into laughter, reminding him that last time, it took a sword god to beat him, and there were no sword gods left alive. Errol smirked and said he wasn't so sure about that. His mother was still alive after all. The moment he said that, Gelda's laughter stopped. Then Errol vanished. He dashed forward using Divine Step, the exact technique of the sword gods, catching the demon off guard. Gelda barely blocked as Errol struck from every angle, moving faster than the eye could follow. The demon grinned through the chaos, reminding him that George's body was that of a sword emperor, meaning Errol's attacks weren't enough. Then Gelda countered with a devastating blow that sent Errol crashing into the arena floor. The demon smirked, certain the fight was over, but when the dust cleared, Errol stood up, barely scratched. All that insane training with Rian Noor had paid off. Gelda lunged again, but this time, Errol parried smoothly, deflecting every hit and responding with his own infinite break. A whirlwind of slashes so fast they blurred into one. The demon staggered backward, overwhelmed. For the first time in centuries, Gelda felt fear. He couldn't believe a human boy was using techniques only a sword god should know. Before he could recover, Errol struck one final devastating blow. The impact tore through the demon's body, and George collapsed in a heap. The crowd erupted, cheering, crying, losing their minds. But their victory was short-lived. The sword itself began glowing. Gelda's laughter echoed again as his spirit left George's body, looking for a new host, and lunged straight toward Rod. Errol tried to act fast, shoving Rian Noor aside, but Rod stepped forward to protect his daughter. When the smoke cleared, Rod was standing there, clutching the demon sword, with its edge pressed against Lilia's throat. Errol cursed himself for not realizing earlier that the demon's true body was the sword. Gelda, now inside Rod, threatened to kill Lilia if Errol made a move, but Errol stepped forward anyway, saying confidently that Gelda couldn't hurt her. The demon tried, but the hand holding the sword wouldn't move. Rod's body was fighting back. Rod roared, forcing the demon down, then slammed the sword into the ground. As Gelda screamed, Rod ripped the blade free and hurled it toward Errol. Without hesitation, Errol swung his sword, shattering the cursed weapon into pieces, finally ending the demon once and for all. The stadium fell silent, but that's where this episode ends. Remember to like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because Errol's journey is far from over. After Dragonfang's insane tournament win, the guild suddenly became the hottest spot in town. Dozens of newbie swordsmen rushed in, dreaming of greatness. Rod, who had rediscovered his motivation, began training them in the yard. But the problem was simple. He was too strong. Every trainee got folded like cheap laundry within seconds. They started running away like cockroaches from sunlight. Lilia stopped one of them and asked why he was fleeing. The poor kid pointed at Rod and said the man was basically a torture machine disguised as a teacher. She actually agreed. Her dad really was too much. Still, she couldn't help smiling because the guild that was once rotting like expired cabbage finally had life again, all thanks to Errol. But when the trainee asked where their hero Errol was, Lilia's smile died instantly. She muttered that Errol had already left the guild. The moment she thought about him, tears burst out. Meanwhile, Errol was already in a carriage heading home. The driver wondered why the new champion of the kingdom wasn't staying to enjoy his fame. Errol replied that there was nothing left to learn in Brescia. He He'd already mastered everything worth mastering. The driver agreed but pointed out that they were returning to the most boring countryside imaginable. Errol didn't care. He wanted to go home and finally test his sword skills, maybe even beat his terrifying mom. Back home, Farah was picking roses when she felt a presence and realized Errol was behind her, we'll see. He proudly announced that he had won the Sword God Cup. She smiled, then teleported right in front of him before he could blink. Errol froze. If she'd been holding a sword, he would have turned into kebab. Knowing he came home to challenge her, Farah calmly told him to follow her to the training ground. There, mother and son raised their swords. Farah was excited to see how much he'd grown. Errol told her to enjoy the moment because he planned to defeat her today. She didn't even respond. She simply blitzed him with lightning speed attacks. Errol barely blocked them, noting that he only survived because she used the same pattern in the garden earlier. He countered with rapid strikes, but Farah blocked them all with casual elegance. Their battle shook the entire village. While the neighbors thought a monster was attacking, Errol leapt into the sky and unleashed stronger techniques. Farah responded with a binding spell, but he powered through it. Seeing that her son was strong enough to stand against her, she stopped holding back. Both activated Infinity Break, the strongest skill they possessed, and clashed head-on. Sometime later, Rihanna arrived in the village after searching everywhere for him. She knocked on the door, and Errol's little sister Mira answered. Mira saw a tall red-headed girl and instantly activated jealous little sister mode. She called Rihanna a cow and tried to shut the door. Rihanna held it open, trying to reason with the little gremlin. Then Farah and Errol returned, both bruised like they had rolled down a mountain. Mira jumped at her brother, and Rihanna noticed how similar the siblings looked. Mira asked who won the duel, and Errol admitted he technically did, but only because his mom wasn't at her prime. Farah scoffed, saying she was still young. Farah then spotted Rihanna and immediately jumped to conclusions, inviting her inside for tea like she was meeting her future daughter-in-law. Inside, she wasted no time and asked Rihanna how she fell in love with her son. Rihanna nearly died of embarrassment. Mira got jealous again. Errol stepped in to explain that they simply lived in the same city. Rihanna clarified they were only guildmates. Errol then asked why she came. She said it was rude of him to leave without saying goodbye. He countered that he had filled out the resignation form. She argued back that relationships mattered. He replied that he didn't care about relationships, only swordsmanship. She was speechless. Farah, on the other hand, looked thrilled a girl came all this way for her son. Rihanna added that she lived in the village too, and she wanted Farah to train her. Before Farah could respond, Captain Evans barged in, panicking about destroyed trees and wrecked ground in the forest. Farah awkwardly admitted she and Errol caused it. Evans calmed down, until he noticed his daughter sitting inside. Farah was shocked to learn Rihanna was his child. Evans was horrified to find her here, but before he could question her, Farah excitedly declared that Rihanna came to train to become a good wife.
What?
Evans started crying. Rihanna insisted she wanted sword training, not housekeeping. Farah completely ignored that, deciding she would teach her both. Evans supported the idea, embarrassing the life out of Rihanna. After Evans left, Errol visited his father, Leo. He asked about the magic Leo was studying. Leo said it was a powerful finishing move, but quickly put it away. When Errol mentioned hearing Mira scream earlier, Leo assumed his son finally bagged a girl and congratulated him. Errol shut that down and revealed he defeated his mother in a duel. Leo congratulated him again, then braced himself for the real question. Errol asked if Leo could teach him magic. Leo immediately refused. He said magic required innate magical energy, something Errol definitely didn't have. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Farah tried training Rihanna in housework. Rihanna held a cabbage and a knife like she was about to fight a raid boss. She swung the knife and cut straight through the cabbage, and the table, and Mira's mug. Farah realized the girl had zero domestic talent. Rihanna admitted the guild had a cook, so she never learned. Farah decided she would fix this disaster. Rihanna begged to focus only on swordsmanship, but Farah lectured that a swordsman must master mind and body, including basic living skills. Rihanna accepted her fate. Later, after repairing the destroyed table, Errol asked Leo again about magic. Leo insisted magic required talent he didn't have. Errol explained that during guild training, he drank tons of holy water and magic potions, even questionable expired ones, and felt a strange energy in his body afterward. Leo panicked, thinking his son was a victim of domestic violence, but Errol clarified it was consensual training. Realizing Errol might actually have magic, Leo decided to test him. He asked Errol to focus mana into his palms. After intense concentration, Errol produced a small glow. Leo was thrilled. Errol collapsed from exhaustion, feeling disappointed at how weak the glow was, and Leo admitted he wasn't even at child sorcerer level yet, but he could grow. Errol smiled, saying he was good at hard work. Overwhelmed with pride, Leo cried as his son passed out. Later, Errol woke up and went to buy mana potions. The shopkeeper assumed they were for Leo. Errol simply said they were for himself, then bought the entire stock and started chugging them like energy drinks while training non-stop. 6 months flew by, and Errol finally gathered just enough magic energy to cast the weakest spells known to mankind. Leo praised him like a proud dad, but immediately crushed the hype by telling him he still couldn't use magic properly. Then, Leo handed him a paper full of weird symbols that looked like someone spilled spaghetti on ink and called it language. He explained that it was Magiscript, and every magician had to learn this ancient nonsense before casting real spells. Errol felt the universe personally attacking him. He thought it was annoying to assemble magic chants from scratch every single time, and even Leo agreed the whole thing was a pain. To save Errol's miserable brain, Leo suggested he study at the City of Magic, and when he saw Errol was actually excited, he offered to train him for the entrance exams. During lunch, Mira praised her mom's cooking like usual, but the truth slipped. The food was actually made by Reiner. Mira panicked and immediately took the compliment back out of pure jealousy. Even Errol enjoyed the meal, and Farah proudly said Reiner had leveled up in both cooking and swordsmanship. Errol also noticed how obvious it was that his mom adored this girl. 3 long years later, Reiner nervously presented Farah with a cup of tea, and this time, Farah approved. But their peaceful moment collapsed when Mira stormed in, crying like her world ended. She found a letter in Errol's bed, revealing he left home for the City of Magic with zero explanation. Reiner felt guilty because she once pulled the same disappearing act, so Farah hugged her dramatically, begging her not to abandon them too. Farah also wondered how her kids grew up into such cold adults. A moment later, the real culprit strolled in, rubbing his eyes like he wasn't the main reason everyone was crying. Meanwhile, Errol was already on a carriage heading to the City of Magic. When he asked the driver how long the trip was, he learned it would take 3 more days. Hearing that Errol kept hopping between big cities, the kids in the carriage got curious. They asked if he was also going to the magic school, and he casually nodded. A boy named Kaido asked why Errol was applying at such an old age, and his friend Kufa assumed he was retaking the exam after failing it like 50 times. She tried to defend him, but roasted him even harder by accident. Another girl, Colette, tried to stop their arguing, and Errol slowly realized all 3 kids were fresh new wizards who just unlocked their classes. Kaido proudly announced he uses red magic, then asked what magic Errol used. Errol remembered Leo's explanation about magic being divided by colors and told the kids he was basically a jack of all trades because he's classless. Kufa burst out laughing, convinced a classless guy at a magic school was the funniest joke ever. Kaido demanded he stop lying, but when Errol showed his class card, the kids went silent. Kaido instantly switched from confident wizard to professional bully, mocking Errol for trying magic without a class. Suddenly, a beast roared from the forest and the carriage horses panicked. Errol calmly explained that this sound belonged to a troll king. The kids immediately freaked out. Kaido begged the driver to run, but the horses refused to move. Colette thought they were all about to die, but Kufa reminded her that trolls were slow. Kaido agreed, thinking they could dodge its attacks. The kids got ready to fight, trying not to cry. But then, a massive club flew out of nowhere and sent something flying into orbit. That was only the fake troll. The real Troll King walked out. All 3 kids mentally wrote their wills on the spot. Kaido tried to be brave, stepping forward to fight with shaky hands. He charged all his mana into a fireball and blasted the troll. The explosion looked impressive, but the troll only got angrier. Kaido screamed that he was out of mana. As the beast charged toward them, a massive explosion vaporized it completely. The kids looked around for their savior, only to see Errol casually step out of the carriage, mumbling that he might have used a little too much mana. Kaido realized Errol fired that explosion and freaked out since only high-level archmages could use such magic. Then, Errol healed the horses, and the driver thanked him while admitting he was too lazy to fight himself. Kaido, now trembling with respect, apologized for being rude earlier and declared himself Errol's student. 3 days later, the carriage reached the floating city. Errol admired the magical bridge while Kaido followed him like a loyal dog. Kufa suspected hypnosis magic, and Errol wondered why people always thought he was suspicious. Inside the city, Kaido asked if Errol would apply to the Red School. Errol learned that magic schools were divided by color: red, blue, green, white, yellow, and black. Kufa planned to join the blue school, Colette aimed for the green school, and Errol simply hoped he wouldn't get rejected like the City of Swords again. After dropping the girls off, Errol headed with Kaido to the Red School. He handed in his application, expecting immediate rejection. But the receptionist approved it easily. She said the school gave everyone a fair chance, even classless people. Inside the exam area, an advanced mage showed off his eruption spell, burning a dummy. The crowd went wild. Kaido explained how advanced classes guaranteed a successful life, but Errol just remembered his dad being a magical genius who still ended up living in the countryside. When the arrogant boy finished showing off, Errol and Kaido stepped up next. Errol examined the mithril dummy, extremely heat-resistant, and decided to go all out. He released a tiny, thin flame attack. Everyone laughed at how pathetic it looked, but a second later, the mithril dummy melted into a puddle. The prodigy accused him of cheating, but Errol simply explained he condensed the flame to increase its intensity. Even the examiner was stunned. Errol then headed to the water school and shattered the test dummy using icicle spikes, ruining everyone's confidence again. Then he visited the green school and found Colette too scared to start her exam. She admitted she failed often, so she feared trying again. Errol casually told her failure wasn't the end of life. She froze, processing the wisdom. He repeated that failing didn't kill anyone. That alone gave her the courage she needed. She finally realized she could just try again later. After Colette finally calmed down, she thanked Errol for saving her courage. Errol smiled and asked how the green school exam even worked. Colette explained that all applicants had to do was spin a windmill using their magic. Simple in theory, until Errol walked in. He registered with her, focused his mana, and casually summoned a tornado that shredded the poor windmill like cheap cardboard. Only then did he realize the thing wasn't made of mithril. The examiner didn't care. He passed instantly and sent Colette up next. Despite witnessing Errol's overkill performance, Colette pulled herself together and passed the exam too. After that, Errol moved through the remaining magic schools like he was collecting gym badges. Every exam passed on the first try. Eventually, he reached the Black School of Magic, which looked more like a cursed, abandoned house than an academy. While wandering inside, he spotted a weird creature trapped in a box. A woman rushed in asking if he'd seen her pet, and he pointed at the box. She happily lifted the creature, bragging that she built that chimera in her lab like it was some DIY furniture. Suddenly, a skeleton greeted him. Errol reacted with pure survival instincts and chopped its head off, but the skeleton calmly introduced herself as Latalia, claiming she was a normal person who just so happened to be a walking bag of bones. Errol didn't understand a damn thing, but he asked about the exam. Latalia explained that the Black School didn't have exams at all because nobody wanted to join them anyway. Their simplicity scared him more than the skeleton, but he accepted. Back in the city, Kaido and the girls ran up to him, shouting his name like a fan club. They immediately demanded to know which school he planned to join, then argued among themselves like siblings fighting over the last cookie. Errol sighed and told them he planned to attend all the schools. Kaido said joining 2 schools was already insane, but Errol casually revealed he was attending all 6. The kids mentally broke on the spot. The girls stepped aside to whisper about Errol's unbelievable workload, while Kaido begged him to take the first red class together. Once everyone regrouped, it was time for lesson 1. In class, the advanced mage Royce spotted them immediately, and Kaido began roasting him again for losing to Errol. Royce tried defending himself and asked about Errol's class. Errol told him he wasn't a spellcaster or a mage. Royce panicked, assuming he was an archmage. Errol denied that too. Royce's brain officially blue-screened. The teacher walked in and Royce asked him to confirm Errol's class. The teacher checked the list and casually announced that Errol was classless. Royce froze like someone unplugged his soul. After they sat down, the teacher began writing complicated Magiscript on the board. Kaido felt his brain leaking out of his ears, while Errol wondered why they were learning basic magic language at all, since most spellcasters automatically used Magiscript through skills. The teacher explained that understanding the magical language helped strengthen spells and reduce mana drain. Advanced mages could even alter spell structures to create new effects. Kaido realized Errol had been doing that casually without school training. Errol himself admitted he simply copied his father, who played with spells like toy blocks. The next day, Errol visited the Green School again. The lessons were all basic stuff he already knew, but he got excited about flight magic since he'd never learned it. Colette was stunned that someone who could vaporize monsters didn't even know how to fly. Errol said his dad was terrified of heights, so flight magic was banned in the house. The wind teacher instructed everyone to imagine riding a gust of wind and becoming a birdom. Errol noted that such visualizations only worked for actual wind class students, not him. Colette tried first and managed to float a little before falling. The class laughed, but she stayed determined. Errol attempted flying with a tornado spell and launched himself into the sky like a budget rocket. After slamming into the ground, he admitted that maybe tornado flight was too extreme. A student mocked their failures and showed off his own flying. He mentioned that wind users often race through difficult tracks. Errol immediately wanted to join. The guy mocked him again, saying he needed at least 6 months of practice. Errol confidently said he'd be ready in 2 months. Colette believed him without hesitation. A few nights later, Kaido and the girls returned to the Green School because Colette lost something there. Kufa acted brave despite being terrified of ghosts, and Kaido roasted her for hiding behind Colette. They bickered until they noticed a ghostly figure floating behind her and screamed in terror. The ghost covered Colette's mouth and then revealed himself as Errol. He explained he was practicing flying at night and confirmed he was literally asleep while doing it to save time. Kaido panicked about his health, but Errol insisted it was fine. The kids realized how little they trained compared to him. Even Kufa felt inspired after hearing his methods. They retrieved Colette's lost item and left. Errol then visited the Black School library where Latalia was excited to see him again. When he said he just wanted to read books, she looked heartbroken. She tried hiring him for her office, but he politely refused. The next day at the Red School, Errol corrected the teacher's Magiscript on the board, shocking everyone. He explained he memorized every spell manually because he didn't have automatic skills. The teacher asked him to write his shorter version on the board. Errol removed 2 whole lines of unnecessary phrases. The teacher acknowledged his efficiency but warned him that removing safety lines could cause explosions. Errol casually said divine protection would shield him as long as he didn't die. The teacher stared at him like he needed therapy. Impressed, the teacher offered him a chance to skip straight to second-year exams. Royce demanded to take the promotion exam too. They entered a sealed arena. The teacher warned them the monster inside was dangerous. Royce went first. A Minotaur charged out and Royce launched an upgraded eruption spell but missed completely. Errol admired his power but noted his terrible accuracy. The Minotaur rushed Royce and just before it struck, it disappeared. The teacher laughed and admitted they never used real monsters for exams. Royce, humiliated, realized he wasn't even close to Errol's level. The teacher reminded him that exams were supposed to be taken 2 years later, so the result was good for his age. But Royce still felt crushed. Royce finally accepted reality. He was weak, completely, undeniably weak. He promised his teacher he'd train harder, and the teacher nodded before turning to Errol, telling him to get ready for his test. Errol stepped into the arena expecting the same Minotaur from before, but the moment the gate opened, he noticed something was off. This one looked bigger, uglier, and definitely more pissed off. Even the teacher looked confused. Seconds later, another instructor sprinted in, proudly admitting she released a higher-level Minotaur because she assumed the exam was for Errol. The teacher nearly had a heart attack. Down in the arena, the upgraded Minotaur charged like a truck with horns. Errol didn't panic. He calmly summoned 2 blazing fire spears, shocking everyone. The instructor, Bacchus, noted that they were weaker than Eruption, but way better for hitting a fast target. Errol launched them, but the Minotaur jumped like it moonlighted as a gymnast. Bacchus reminded him frontal attacks wouldn't work, so Errol changed tactics. He redirected the spears behind the Minotaur, slamming them into its back and dropping the monster instantly. Bacchus asked if he added a homing effect, and Errol casually nodded. Then, he vaporized the corpse completely with Eruption, because why not? The teacher stood there stunned, realizing Errol was on par with the school's top mage. He refused to believe a classless student could be this strong and started silently praying that Errol's class card was misread. Errol climbed back up and asked if he passed with a smile. Bacchus confirmed he did and told him to join second-year classes immediately. Meanwhile at home, Rhiannon was struggling with cooking. Every hot utensil scared her like it was alive. Farah suggested resting, but Rhiannon kept trying. Mira mocked her slow progress, but Farah defended her, saying, "Good things take time." At the Blue Academy, Errol asked teacher Hengel about taking a promotion exam. She told him to wait until the end of the year. He asked if she could make an exception. She said exceptions were only for special students. He replied he'd show her his water magic. She sighed and said she'd promote him only if he performed well in class. Errol insisted the classes were pointless for him. Hengel felt disrespected, and Errol had to clarify that her lessons weren't bad. Enraged, Hengel dragged him to a private yard for a duel. Kufa watched nervously, wondering how Errol would handle someone nearly at Archmage level. Hengel announced no physical attacks were allowed. Errol agreed instantly, which irritated her even more. She unleashed an ice tornado, freezing him inside a giant ice cube. She confidently declared victory until Errol shattered the ice from the inside using Ice Barrier. Now actually taking him seriously, she summoned Ice Blades to counter his barrage of icicles. Errol noted she was definitely qualified to be a teacher, but he wasn't done. No, he summoned hundreds more icicles surrounding her entire body. Hengel realized too late that redirecting that many spells required terrifying skill. She braced herself behind a barrier, expecting him to run out of mana. Instead, Errol warned her he was ending the match. When she pointed out none of his icicles pierced her shield, he said that was intentional. Then, he dropped a glacial lance from above, punching straight through her shield and knocking her out of the duel. After winning, Errol walked out and met the kids. They learned Hengel promoted him on the spot, since he aimed to master every magic style. Errol immediately moved toward promotion in the Green School. He and Colette visited the Wind teacher, who instantly shut him down. Claiming the school didn't accept special requests, she flipped through the policy book and admitted the headmaster could promote students directly, but warned that disturbing him would get Errol expelled. That killed the idea instantly. Colette asked why he was in such a rush. Errol explained he wanted to catch up to someone he admired. When he asked again to demonstrate his strength, the teacher still refused. Colette then came up with a genius shortcut: win the school's flying race. The headmaster always presented the trophy in person. Errol agreed immediately, but the teacher warned him it was a brutal race with over 300 competitors. Errol said that was fine. At the race grounds, the arrogant wind user from earlier, Skake, approached Errol. Errol didn't even remember him, wounding the boy's soul. Skake bragged about becoming the best wind user ever. Errol simply told him he planned to win today. Skake reminded him he couldn't fly 2 months ago. The announcer Grid began the event. He introduced the handsome commentator, Instructor Domel. The girls went crazy and Kaido got jealous. When the race started, half the inexperienced mages crashed into each other like chickens. One student even slammed into the audience, and Domel casually pointed out he'd done the same last year. Diane led the race, with Skake and Errol keeping close. Skake panicked when Errol called the current speed slow. When the course hit a sharp turn, the top 2 mages crashed into a lake. Skake barely made the turn and thought he left Errol behind until Errol floated beside him like it was nothing. Dione increased her speed. Skake tried pushing himself but ran out of mana and fell back. Meanwhile, Errol kept up. When Dione sped up again, Errol used bursts of compressed air under his boots. Dommel explained that only powerful swordsmen could pull off something like that. Errol silently admired his accurate guess. He was actually using a swordsman movement skill. Approaching the final dangerous turn, Dion slowed down to survive. Errol didn't. Grid swore he'd crash, but Errol punched the air to push his body back and angled perfectly into the gate. He crossed the finish line and won his first race ever. Dione congratulated him. Skake limped in for 3rd place. The headmaster handed Errol his medal, certificate, and, most importantly, a direct promotion to 2nd grade. He asked where Errol learned such advanced magic. Errol claimed he learned it in class. The headmaster didn't believe a word, but still wished him luck. With the red, blue, and green promotions secured, Errol headed off to conquer the remaining 3 schools next. A few days later, Errol showed up at the yellow school and immediately asked the nearest teacher if he could get promoted. The teacher explained that fast-track promotion required showing off a useful item in the school's official showcase. But because Errol forgot to register like a responsible human being, all slots were full, and he'd have to wait months. He even tried flexing, claiming he made a new type of golem, but she shut him down again. However, another instructor named Rojwell overheard the word golem and instantly locked onto Errol like a starving raccoon spotting free food. He said that if Errol really made a special golem, he'd take him in as his research assistant and squeeze him into the showcase. The offer sounded too good to be real, but Errol accepted anyway. The teacher behind him warned that he had basically just walked into a trap. She explained that Rogwell was a golem maniac who built combat golems and used the showcases to bully students with them. Errol finally realized the man was planning to use him as a punching bag, but he didn't mind. He trusted his own strength more than his common sense. A few days later, the showcase began. Teachers proudly displayed their magical creations. Then Rojwell walked into the arena like a WWE villain and announced his big performance. The spectators started whispering that another poor soul was about to get crushed today. Rojwell summoned his earth golems and told Errol to bring out his creation. Errol nodded and summoned Alpha. The moment Alpha stepped out, Rogwell froze. It wasn't stone, wood, or crystal. It was pure metal. The crowd was impressed, and Rojwell assumed someone was hiding inside the armor. But when he removed the helmet, he found it completely empty. After inspecting it, Rojwell realized Errol had made Alpha from a custom lightweight metal. He laughed, assuming that meant the golem was weak. So he commanded his earth golems to attack. His first golem charged at Alpha and immediately got humbled. Alpha blocked one punch, and the force shattered the golem's arm like it was made of chalk. The crowd gasped, and Rogwell finally stopped clowning around. He hardened his golems and launched a full assault, thinking Alpha couldn't block everything with only 2 arms. Errol simply summoned swords for Alpha. Rogwell laughed again, thinking adding weapons made things worse. Then, Alpha unleashed one swing, just one, and Rogwell's entire lineup of golems exploded into magical gravel. Rogwell nearly fell over. Errol casually explained that he gave Alpha flexible joints and lightweight alloy, so it consumed less mana and could move like a real swordsman. Rogwell understood the logic, but emotionally, he was still processing the war crime he just witnessed. Errol asked if this was enough to qualify for the promotional exam, but Rojwell said assistants weren't allowed to take it. Instead, he offered to personally get the headmaster to promote him, but only if Errol joined his lab. After securing Yellow School's promotion, Errol headed to the White Institute. There, he met Instructor Keed, who had her eyes closed. Errol asked if she was okay, and she explained she was blind but could sense mana in everything. Then she peeked into his mana flow beam and nearly had a heart attack. His body was packed with bottomless magical energies. She guided him into a dark cave filled with undead bones animated by condensed mana. Errol lit a spell, and Keed warned him undead are attracted to light. A swarm of skeletons rushed in, but Errol erased them with a holy ray like he was deleting browser history. Keed had to sprint to keep up with him. Errol asked if the exam continued deeper, but Keed calmly said he already passed. He only needed to defeat a few undead. She worried he'd run out of mana going back, but Errol told her he hadn't even used 1% yet. Suddenly, a higher-ranked undead ambushed them. Errol blasted it immediately, but the skeleton tried introducing itself. Too bad Errol didn't care, he blasted it again and again. Every time it tried speaking, he nuked it. Finally, he blasted it with Holy Cross, completely incinerating it. Keed was stunned because Holy Cross was supposed to be an advanced exorcist technique. Errol casually said it felt only slightly stronger than Holy Light. Next, he visited the Black School. As he read books, Latalia popped up behind him and he reflexively knocked her head off again. While she reattached it, he complained the Black School didn't have any promotional exam. Latalia explained the school used to until everything fell apart. Errol noticed the empty building and asked about a door leading to a blank room. Latalia explained it was a testing lab for black magic, since black magic shortens lifespans and can't be used outdoors. Errol immediately claimed the room as his personal explosion playground. Inside, he opened a strange old book. It glowed. Then the pages turned blank. The magic had leaked out, and so had something else. A man floated in the air and thanked Errol for freeing him. Errol asked if he was a demon. The man confirmed it and politely offered Errol a gift, which turned out to be a murder attempt. When Errol tried explosion magic, the spell fizzled. The demon bragged about sealing the room's magic, so Errol simply beat him with physical attacks. He slashed, punched, and beat the demon like a malfunctioning printer. He kept swinging until the demon shrank to the size of a rat. Finally, the demon begged for mercy. Errol accepted, then branded him with a slave seal. When the demon tried resisting, he burst into flames from the curse. Perfect obedience unlocked. Later, Errol met up with the kids. They congratulated him and bullied the mini-demon, now named Maddie. Errol didn't care and even sent Maddie to buy lunch while the poor demon got cooked alive by the contract again. Maddie left muttering about revenge. 6 months later, all 6 school headmasters met for the annual budget meeting. The official explained funding depended on student and staff numbers. The Black School's headmaster, Blag, threw a tantrum when he heard their budget got cut by 40. The others roasted him for his creepy magic and useless research. The official revealed schools could get more funding if they performed well in the 6-school magic contest during the upcoming Mage Lord Festival. But Blag was told he'd only get last year's budget even if he won. Blag realized everyone wanted his school dead. Meanwhile, Errol asked the kids what the Mage Lord Festival was like. They explained it was the biggest festival of the year, with the 6-school contest as the main event. Errol said he planned to join the rookie division. The kids argued over which magic he should use. He said he'd use everything, and Maddie asked which school he'd represent. Errol explained the headmasters had summoned him for a meeting tomorrow, so he'd find out then. That night, Blag drew a disturbing magic circle and mumbled about proving the greatness of black magic. He summoned the strongest monster of the demon realm, which immediately ate him. The blob absorbed him and escaped into the city. And that closes out another episode of Magical Nonsense. If you made it to the end without your soul leaving your body, you're not normal, you're elite. Now let's confuse all the fake fans again. Type, "He touched it again," in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and brace yourself, because the next recap is gonna slap even harder.